First, all right, here we go. This episode of Robservations is sponsored by The John Campea Show. Find The John Campea Show on YouTube or find the audio version wherever you get your podcasts. Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it, especially if you love the movies?
Hey, my name is King, or as some of you might know me better, Israel. I've gotten around, but hopefully you recognize me from my own channel, King Tannic. There's a new show coming to the Burnettwork that I think is pretty exciting. Welcome to the Otaku Experience, hosted by yours truly. There is going to be a weekly series where we dive into the news and the world of anime, manga, and whatever the heck else Japan has to offer us. The show will be pre-recorded and premiere on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Pacific time or 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Burnettwork YouTube channel.
Observations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi or cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and the as-yet undefined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am, of course, robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity. For the record, this is Robservations episode number 852. Tonight is a very special episode of Robservations. I have a very special guest, Rick Cleveland. Mr. Cleveland has been working in Hollywood as a writer for well over 2 decades and worked on some amazing shows you might know, like, The West Wing, 6 Feet Under. He's worked on a lot of shows, and he has a lot of experience. And I had read an article that he wrote in the LA Times about the WGA strike, the Writers Guild of America strike. And concurrently to that, Mike Bodden, my business partner, who sends me your letters from the website, Rick Cleveland himself contacted me and wanted to know if I wanted to take a look at his article, discuss it. He wanted me to discuss it on Robservations. And he had contacted me once before, a while ago, and maybe I didn't get back to him. I must have flaked. But I said, dude, why don't you come on the show? So I have Mr. Cleveland waiting in the wings. But before that, I would like to read this article that he wrote sort of as an introduction to him. And so you can understand why my perspective was such that I felt after reading this that it was very worthwhile to talk about. Now, I understand this is going to be pretty inside baseball, but since the Writers Guild has basically the strike, and we have potentially right behind it a looming director's strike, who knows what's going to happen? There hasn't been one of these in 15 years. Somebody had said it's like The Godfather. These things have to happen every couple of years to clear away the bad blood. I'm paraphrasing. But I think this is going to be an interesting show and worth sticking around for. So this is the article Mr. Cleveland wrote, and it was in the LA Times, and it's an op-ed piece. Opinion. You want to understand the writer's strike? Start with the new writer's room. And again, this is by Rick Cleveland, and this is his story. In 1995, it's weird that I'm reading it to you, I suppose, because he could tell you this, but I kind of wanted you to hear this from me because you'll see why I wanted to talk to him. And it would be weird if he went over this himself. Anyway, we'll see. It'll work. It won't. What are you going to do? I'm now going to talk in Rick Cleveland's voice, and you're about to meet him when I finish. So, hey, that's some weird stuff. But, hey, only the internet brings you the best entertainment in the world. And this is by Rick Cleveland. In 1995, I graduated from the University of Iowa's Playwrights Workshop. And that same year, Universal Studios optioned a screenplay I'd written, earning me a union card in the Writers Guild of America. For the first time in my adult life, I had health insurance and a pension plan and an office in Barry Kemp's production company, the creator of Newhart and Coach. 3 years later, in 1998, I adapted an original stage play of my own as a screenplay, and that movie, Jerry and Tom, earned a spot at the Sundance Film Festival. That movie got me my first TV writing job, a summer replacement series for ABC titled Maximum Bob. Maybe that should be my new nickname. My second job writing for TV was for season 1 of The West Wing, and my title on that series was co-producer. In 2000, I shared an Emmy Award for Outstanding Writing for a Drama Series with Aaron Sorkin, the show's creator. It was only my second episode of television. Later that same year, I went to work on 6 Feet Under during its first season, and I stayed with the series through its finale in 2005. After that, I did stints on Mad Men and Nurse Jackie. By then, I had not only written scripts, but helped cast them, work with directors, and supervise production on set and in editing. I learned the ropes of television production, going from co-producer up the ranks to executive producer, earning 5 more Emmy nominations along the way. In 2010, I was hired as a writer and co-executive producer on Netflix's first big original content production, House of Cards. This was streaming television in its infancy. The first offer from Netflix that came through my agent was for less money than I had been paid in my first job 12 years earlier. In spite of Kevin Spacey and David Fincher's star power and a $100 million budget, my agent was told it was a web series, a new era of guild jurisdiction not yet subject to the minimum writers earn today. Luckily, Netflix blinked and the offer got real, and I was paid my customary per-episode fee. On 6 Feet Under, we would write and produce 12 episodes over 9 months. On House of Cards, the production timeline would stretch by months and for fewer episodes. A few years later, I got hired for season 2 of Man in the High Castle, Amazon's first big streaming series. Those 10 episodes took almost a full year to write and produce. I didn't know it at the time because I was still making my per-episode amount, but I was making less and less money because it was taking longer and longer to produce fewer episodes. Over the length of my career, I've been able to get married, buy a house, and with the lion's share of the work being done by my wife, Mary, raise 3 kids. My family and I needed that health insurance more times than I can count. It's been a literal lifesaver. Somewhere in the last few years, most TV writers have started working under limited 20-week contracts. The entire season gets written during those 20 weeks, before production begins, and at that point, all the scripts are banked, and all but a couple of writers are let go. For the majority of younger writers working today, that's the structure they know. They don't cast their episodes and never set foot on set during production. That one change has made it so much more difficult for younger writers to do any of what I was able to do. If I were starting now, I wouldn't have been able to stick it out and make a career for myself. Is this an instance of high-paid scribes crying, "My diamond shoes are too tight"? Maybe to some, but that we are paid better than teachers or nurses is worth a separate discussion elsewhere. But the bottom line is this: the corporations that pay us made $28 billion in 2021 compared with $5 billion when I won my Emmy in 2000. Me, I'm okay. I've had a great run. In large part because when I got my WGA card, the generation of writers who came before me made working conditions better. Now, though, streamers have turned us into easily replaceable widgets. Emmys and Oscars are still being given to worthy writers. Is the quality of today's series writing getting worse? Of course not. But fewer writers are getting the opportunity to grow and become better while on the job. Working for 20 weeks means being off 30 to 50 weeks between jobs or seasons. And that, in a nutshell, is what largely defines this new gig economy. Why is it so many of today's writers are having a much harder time building a sustainable career? And why is it that working conditions are harder and growing worse than when I got into this business? I know there are other vital issues worth fighting for, but I hope I've at least answered those two questions. Well, I would say that Mr. Rick Cleveland did, and to continue the discussion, the man who just wrote that article, please welcome, give him a big round. I know he can't hear it, but just pretend you are. Mr. Rick Cleveland, welcome to Robservations. It is a great honor to have you here, sir, and I'm very much looking forward to speaking with you.
Hey, Rob, thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of your channel and your show.
When you said that, I was like, really? I mean, that's very flattering to find out. I mean, you know, again, you've worked on some of my, The West Wing is to me, The West Wing is, if you were to set a Star Trek show in the White House, that was what The West Wing was. So, you know, I know there's a lot of people like the Akutas that worked on many iterations of Star Trek. They're huge West Wing fans as well. So, I mean, it's an honor to have you here. So I love this. I love this article that you wrote, and I guess I wanted to ask you, like, I've lived a life within indie movies. I've barely gone into big budget Hollywood productions, but one of the things that I've always been grateful for was the time that I was a PA, and that I could be on the sets of whether it was Army of Darkness or Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 or the movies I worked on, to see how a set works and how a set runs. And I learned invaluable lessons just being on a set, going to get people coffee or helping out the art department build a set or something. And the way you describe being in a position where a writer was in a position of, and then you got to see how things were directed, you were in the edit room. You need to understand that to be an effective writer or a producer on anything, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, after I spent the first season on 6 Feet Under in the editing room, it improved my writing. I started to realize that, you know, sometimes I'd write a scene and I'd think, there's no way this doesn't end up on the cutting room floor, and then I just wouldn't write that scene, or I'd delete it.
Right. And it saves time. I mean, and look, I love editing. I've been an editor for so long. And like you said, editing also helps you understand, okay, well, what set do we need to build? How much of a set do we need to build? Once you understand that all that matters is what the camera sees, you know, it really helps you understand the whole process. And I mean, you can save money in the long run, understanding what needs to be built or shot and what doesn't.
Yeah, and the writing continues in the editing room.
Yeah, absolutely.
As much as it before you're on set and while you're on set, and it doesn't stop there.
I mean, so obviously the business, the economics of the business have changed. Why do you think that it takes so long? Like, there was a great article that came out about Amazon's production woes on various shows like Rings of Power and Citadel, and it said that Citadel cost $300 million to produce 6 40-minute episodes of TV. And I was just astonished by this. You know, I mean, television production, I've only directed and worked in one TV show, but the efficiency, it used to be that TV shows, episodic shows especially, are an incredibly well-oiled machine. You've got first ADs that tyrannically run the set to make their days. You have showrunners that know exactly what they're doing. And it seems like now there's less of that in some of these shows. Some of these shows are obviously very well run and work. It seems like most of the HBO shows, except I guess with this new show, The Idol or whatever, you're reading things like it hasn't worked out well. But why do you think that there's been such a change in some of the ways people are doing business? Is there just too much money involved? Can Amazon, they have a endless bank account, so they don't have to do what frugal producers did in the past?
HBO is still, I think, running a pretty tight ship for the most part.
Yeah.
Um, I think that it's a different kind of corporate culture in streaming. It has more to do with, I think, Silicon Valley than what I, grew up in with, network and cable and basic cable and premium cable television.
Right. But how is it different? I mean, production's still the same, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, though, I think there are a whole lot more cooks in the kitchen now.
Right.
There are more network execs, streaming execs that you have to, run everything by more people than you traditionally had to with, cable and network.
And of course, those people have never produced shows themselves, so they don't know what they're doing in terms of day-to-day production anyway. And yet they're all having to weigh in.
Yeah, I'll tell you this much from what I've experienced, and I've worked on some great shows, and I've worked on some shows that were much less than great, and the shows that took me and my wife to the Emmy Awards or the Golden Globe Awards or the Writers Guild Awards season after season were the shows where the showrunner and the writers were largely left alone to do what we wanted to do, and the shows that struggle are the exact opposite. They have so many people giving so much input that you're kind of writing what they let you write.
How did that happen? How I know you talk about corporate culture, and to me, a corporation's job is not to be a great storyteller. Corporations look at how they hire people based on education, merit, something that looks good on a piece of paper, like, oh, we're going to hire this guy, whether or not they have practical experience. But it just seems to me like when you're dealing with production, where literally, I've said this a lot on the show, every second costs money. In a 12-hour day, you have a certain finite amount of resources, whether it's, I don't know, $100,000 day or something, and you can actually backtrack and figure out how much every second cost. You have to have the most capable people on set to be able to make your day. You can write the greatest script in the world, but if you don't have a crack team of people to get on set during production to make it for you, it isn't going to happen. So it used to be that TV was such a finely tuned, we were talking about Star Trek before we started on the show, go figure. But when Rick Berman was producing 18 seasons of Star Trek or 25 seasons of Star Trek over 18 years, his machine worked perfectly. If they wanted to make a bigger budget episode and spend more money here, they would make a bottle episode or 2 or 3 bottle episodes, and they always ended up balancing their budget. They never went over budget at the end of a season, and yet now that seems to not be the case. People are always spending too much money.
I think it really helps if you have a room full of writers that are there employed all the way through production, so that you can do that when you can break an episode in the middle of production that's going to break the bank, and then know that the next episode has to be a bottle episode, and you can only use 3 sets that you have built or whatever it is. And if you're just, nowadays, most of the writers in the writer's room are only working 20 weeks. Almost all the writing gets done in that 20 weeks. And then it's up to the showrunner and maybe one co-EP to sit all the way, through production from episode 1 through episode 8 or episode 10 or episode 12, whatever it is. And it's just too much. It's too much work for 1 or 2 people to do.
Yeah, and I would think that having more of those people employed during that time would make the process go smoother, and in the long run, it's going to save you money anyway. I mean, doesn't it? If you, like you said, having writers participate in the entire process, having them on set for their episodes that they've written, where they can make some changes if changes need to happen, or if there needs to be, like, there have been times when maybe you're over schedule and you need to trim a scene. Having a writer there is sort of essential, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've had that happen. I've, had to cut pages, when you're running out of daylight and you still got too many scenes to shoot. I don't know. I have a feeling that the streamers, now that they've started to hurt in the stock market, and lose subscribers, Netflix especially, I think they're more panicked about the money they're spending. When they started with House of Cards, it didn't matter if they made their money back. I don't know if Amazon or Netflix have shown a profit from any of the original content they produce. But now they're a lot more conscious about the money they're spending, and the one place they feel that they can, cut costs the most is with writers.
Which seems to that seems antithetical to me, since the writers are the people that come up with the stories that you're making. To not have the writers intimately involved, whether you're a show creator, a showrunner, or a combination of both, I would think that it would be essential to keep the writing staff around, because the writers, I mean, it doesn't work this way with features, but with television shows, if you look, we've lived through the last 20 years, like shows you've worked on yourself, West Wing, Mad Men, which I maintain is one of the greatest TV series ever made, whether it's The Wire or The Sopranos, or even all the way through to Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, Succession now. I just finished watching The Diplomat, which I thought West Wing alumni created that show, and I thought it was terrific. And it's essentially, in a way, a bottle show where it was all set in one house, one big house, but one house. And there's some great writing going on now, and I would think it would be pretty apparent by looking at those shows and how they're produced that the ones that work better probably are produced in a way where the writers are more involved, I would imagine.
Now, I don't know if the writers were on The Diplomat, and I think that show's one of the smartest shows on television right now. It
Yeah, me
reminds
too.
of the West. And I think, I hope that the showrunner was surrounded by writers through the production process. It might have just been, one or two people, though. I know that, one of the writers on The Bear was so broke that when he went to the WGA awards to get his statue, he had negative money in his bank account and had to go in hot to buy a tie.
Wow. That's just, I mean, to me, it feels like everybody now has become, a friend of mine, a producer friend of mine said to me a couple years ago, we were working on this independent movie. He goes, Rob, we've all become professional hobbyists. We used to make money in our profession, but now we only do our professions as a hobby, because you can't sustain a career. Like I could work on an independent movie. Let's say I were to produce a $5 million film, and that's all I did for 2 years. On a $5 million movie, I would be lucky to make $150,000, $200,000 as my fee for all in. I might have a piece on the back end of the movie, but to be paid while it's being made, because the budget's only $5 million. There's not more money to give anybody, because you're already on a razor thin margin. So how does anybody go in, and you already have to have money to get yourself by when you make your independent movies, because you're not going to be able to finance, you're not going to make enough money on the movie you're making to live. And
yeah, my because I was making a living, she was able to raise our kids and teach preschool, substitute teach preschool while I was at work. And now there's one writer I'm working with on the show I'm on now, and he's only able to write for television because his wife has an amazing job that pays better than his.
But he's got if the show hits or something, he's got the clout to say his wife's proud of her husband. Like, I might be bringing home the bacon, but he's writing for TV. You can watch his show. Well, that's kind of what the strike is all about, the devaluation of the writers and of the writers' room. I mean, so there's been a lot of talk of hiring mini writers' rooms, where they even develop scripts just to see if they're going to make the show now. So writers are being hired to basically workshop a project, and if it doesn't workshop out well, they get paid a little money for their time, but then they just don't make the show, and they've wasted these writers' time, and they're not getting paid enough to, I mean, they're, in a way, it's kind of, they're abusing the process. They want to have their cake and eat it too, and I think isn't this partly what they're striking over?
Yeah, absolutely. The mini room and the 20-week contract. And, even if you do a bang up job in 20 weeks and you write a couple of great scripts for a show and the showrunner wants you back for the following season, you're going to be off for anywhere from 30 to 50 or 60 weeks before that next season starts. So there's almost no chance that you're going to be available, unless you're working at a bookstore or something, or, driving Uber. And then you'll be available for that second season. But that's really what it's gotten down to.
Do you think so? And also you have the looming threat of AI, being used as a tool. I was talking about that the other night on the show. Like, I would say that the WGA, the Writers Guild, should take a hard line on AI and say on television shows or movies, there's no AI writing at all. You can't use AI as an assistant. And I understand people can use it to do first drafts or words on paper drafts, or even have Chat GPT write those drafts for you and then you go in and fix it. But I still think that even if you have something that's generated that way and a writer goes back and does a rewrite, a WGA writer, still there's something kind of lost there. Because if you're hiring a writer, I want to hire a writer. If I want to hire
Right.
Chat GPT to write a script for me, do that. But you're never going to get the kind of a script you're going to get with a deft screenwriter who really has a great grasp of story and an encyclopedic working knowledge of the great works of literature that they're drawing upon to write their stories. I mean,
Right. And AI didn't suffer childhood trauma either, which is where a lot of it comes from. But the AMPTP refuses to even discuss AI with the negotiating committee for the WGA. They just will not discuss it. They said they'll have annual workshops to, talk about its future, but they will not negotiate about it. And then we heard just a couple of days ago that at least one company CEO is planning on having AI generate scripts. And then when the strike is over, he will hire WGA flesh and blood writers to rewrite those scripts.
I mean, look, when I was at CinemaCon, I talked to a few people who'd been to various behind closed doors meetings, and what we're seeing publicly with AI is just the tip of the iceberg. It's just all the I mean, they will be able to generate an entire motion picture with photorealistic avatars and in about 5 years. And the entire motion picture business, I think, is imperiled. And I don't think anyone quite understands. If you could generate your own movies at home by giving your own prompts, and you can just sit around and watch things that came out of your imagination, why would you pay money to go to a theater and watch other people's movies? It's going to be a weird situation. But this idea about AI, I find the whole thing, I mean, when are we going to take a stand and say to ourselves, I mean, this is a weird thing to say, but I really believe that part of the reason that human beings like movies in the first place is subconsciously we know that there's human beings who set up cameras and who do the special effects, and the actors themselves are real people. You can see the twinkle in their eye. We have stars that we like, but if we knew that everything that movies are already make believe. There's nothing. It's all created. But if there's no human element left, and you're just watching AI avatars reading AI words that AI generators created, would human beings be interested in watching those anymore? I mean,
I don't know. I mean, look, if you go back to the Greeks doing theater, like people they experienced true catharsis at the end of those plays. Like they were deeply emotionally involved and invested in storytelling, and some of those stories, they taught you how to live in the world. If you go back to sitting around the campfire outside the cave storytelling days, you learned how not to get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger. You learned how to maybe survive another day in prehistoric times, or ancient times anyway. But I just can't imagine anybody connecting with material written by, and by the way, I think AI is straight up plagiarism, because if they're going to get Guardians of the Galaxy 4 to be written by AI, the only thing AI knows is what it's been fed, and what it's going to be fed are the first 3 Guardians of the Galaxy movies and all the comics that were written by real flesh and blood writers as well.
Yeah, and so it's just going to regurgitate variations on themes. But then again, isn't that what human beings do as well? We just do it biologically as opposed to mechanically. We just regurgitate and rework and remix the stories that we all heard growing up or that we've read in our lives. So how do you quantify, if you're fighting against producers that feel, I keep thinking about going back to Robert Altman's movie The Player, and there's a great scene where Peter Gallagher, who's playing a rival studio boss that's threatening Griffin Mill, Tim Robbins' character at the studio, and he talks about, we don't really need writers, and he takes a newspaper and he reads a teacher in the barrio or something is an inspiration to his students, and he's helping his students rise up. And then Peter Gallagher goes, "See, you just put a sexy Jimmy Smits in there, and you've got a new Stand and Deliver." And it's just picking this stuff out, and that's kind of where I see AI at, is that it's going to just generate, like you can do it right now. Please give me 10 log lines for 10 stories about high school. And Chat GPT will. Then you look at that and you're like, I like 2, 3, and 4. Let's develop those. And then you can sit there. A producer's assistant can take Chat GPT and come up with an entire outline for each one of those 3 stories before lunch. Whether they're good or not remains to be seen, but you can still do it.
You're never going to get a day off that way, or a breakfast club that way. You're never going to get like the idiosyncrasy that the human being, a human being named John Hughes brought to those scripts is what made people love them. It's that human touch, and not just any human. It takes a particular voice with a particular life experience, and AI is just never going to be able to replicate that.
Julius Goodwin, who I like to call the official sommelier of this channel, says he's on his way to bed. Just wanted to check in and see how you and yours are doing. Doing great, Julius. It's been a while. Yes, sir, it has, and we miss you around these parts. But Julius says, while on the subject, how long do you think this strike will last, and how far apart are the negotiating sides really? Those are good questions, Rick.
Yeah, they are. Unfortunately, I think they're as far apart as they can be. And I know the last strike went, 100 days?
Yeah.
I think this is the most existential threat the Guild has ever fought, like more so than in 2007 or 1988. I think that if we cave in, there won't be a Guild in 10 years.
Wow. It's that bad.
Yeah. I mean, look at what's happened with journalism. They're sort of ahead of us, in terms of what to do. Reporters as a career. It used to be one of the most prestigious jobs you could get or study in school, and now everybody's a stringer. Everybody's none. Even if you're a stringer for the New York Times, you don't have health insurance or a pension plan.
Well, I mean, you look at a movie like Spotlight. You had. In Boston, they had their own, the paper had its own clandestine organization that was untouchable, where they allowed these great reporters to go after stories they deemed worthy of going after. I don't see we're going to have, already, like you said, film criticism, journalism of any kind, even journalistic ethics are out the window. And now we're going to be reading, half the stuff we're already reading online is AI generated. And the real question is, where's the human perspective going to be? I was talking on the channel the other day about Zack Snyder last weekend he had a Snyder Con thing where he brought out some people that were in his movies, and he was talking about how when he was in art school that a professor of his said that a photography professor said, look, it's not the camera and the lens that's important. It's the perspective and the point of view of the photographer. You can always get better lenses and equipment and darkroom equipment, whatever you need, more lights, but it's the person that's standing there looking through the camera, deciding what images to capture. That's what's very important, and that a true artist needs to work on their point of view. And the same is true of a writer. You know, I keep thinking about, there's a great scene in When Harry Met Sally when Bruno Kirby is talking to Meg Ryan, and then Carrie Fisher's there talking, and Bruno Kirby's talking about how much he loves Jimmy Breslin, you know, and how much Jimmy Breslin's writing has meant to him, and he wants to follow in his footsteps, and Meg Ryan just hates Jimmy Breslin, and Bruno Kirby says, well, Jimmy Breslin's why I became a writer, but I guess that's not important. You know, and you like, are we going to have that? What's going to happen when I mean, you know, the Hunter S. Thompsons of the world no longer exist? I guess they don't exist already. They're already gone.
Yeah. You know, you reminded me of something, and I was thinking, in the room a couple weeks ago, I brought up a William Goldman story from Ventures in the Screen Trade, and except for the showrunner, there were only two of us in the room who had read that book, and I'm pretty sure some of the younger writers didn't even know who William Goldman was.
Right. Well, it's so funny to me because, like, when that book came out, I was living in Seattle. You know, I ran to the when that came out. I'm like, oh my God, the guy who wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, you know, who wrote the novel The Princess Bride and then adapted his own novel for the screenplay for Rob Reiner's movie. Like, I think he wrote the book before that movie, but I read that book, you know, as somebody who had yet to. I was in high school, I think, when it came out. Everybody had to read. If you were a film fan, everybody read that book. And nowadays,
yeah,
I mean, right? That's where he said,
yeah,
famously says, nobody knows anything in Hollywood.
Yeah. I was in Ohio, I think, when I found that book. And I think that's the one that had the script for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in it.
Yeah.
Or from it. And so, you know, you couldn't find, there was no online. So, you know, seeing an actual movie script, I think the first movie script I saw in script form was for Monty Python and the Holy Grail, but it was because they published a book of the shooting script that was actually sold at my, you know, whatever, Crocs and Brentano or whatever bookstore I was shopping at. They actually had it for sale, and I bought it. And so I knew what a movie script looked like.
Well, so it's interesting because you worked on West Wing, Mad Men, and 6 Feet Under, all three of those shows, and you were pretty much there on 6 Feet Under for the duration. You know, and I remembered, like, how are they going to handle the end of that show? You know, that was a big deal how 6 Feet Under was gonna end. It became a zeitgeist program. Well, as a writer and being on the writing staff, and I think 6 Feet Under, Mad Men to a certain extent as well, but 6 Feet Under, I think Mad Men had a smaller audience maybe than 6 Feet Under did, in terms of, maybe not, but when you're writing for 6 Feet Under, and suddenly that show did become a zeitgeist show because of just the subject matter, and I remember everybody talking about it, and I was knocked out by that first season. What was it like for you as a writer, and what was it like to be in a room on a show like 6 Feet Under? And like, I'm sure when you first started or when the show first began, no one knows if it's going to hit or not, or did you?
Right.
What's the experience like of being on a show like 6 Feet Under? Tell the audience, like, what is that like? Take us through, what does it mean to be a writer on a show like that?
Well, I think by the end of season 2, we had a pretty consistent staff for the rest of the show. But Alan Ball was a playwright, and he had just won the Oscar for American Beauty. And before that, he was doing a sitcom. And the room, I hadn't been in a comedy room before. And even though it was ostensibly a drama, that show, we thought we were writing a comedy, a dark comedy, albeit. But so there was a lot of laughter, and everybody's neuroses and childhood trauma ended up being a part of that show. And we had no idea that it would connect with audiences the way it did. But I think it was in season 2, we went on location, and I flew to Seattle with Peter Krause, who was, played Nate Fisher, and he was kind of getting mobbed in the airport, and then when introduced me as one of the writers, I started to get money. And I thought, wow. And then we started to get invited to funeral directors conventions because funeral directors loved us because I guess we humanized a pretty, a pretty dark, untalked about profession.
Right. But so the process of writing, though.
Sorry?
Oh, the process of writing, like once you see a show taking off and having a writing staff that gels, how is that? What's the work like? How does it work? How does a day on the life of a show work for a writer?
We were, I think people talked about us as being the happiest writers' room in Hollywood because we didn't have long back-breaking hours. HBO, they didn't lean heavily on us with notes. They kind of let us do what we wanted to do. There were just a couple of times when they maybe didn't like what we were doing, but for the most part, because we were all producing our own episodes, we had very humane, almost easy working hours, I'd say. Like there were a lot of days when we would knock off by 4 or 5, and if you were on set, that was hours. But that was where the fun was too.
Sure, but does that happen now today? I mean, are writers quote unquote producing their own episodes these days or not?
No, I mean most writers, they're not setting foot on set or in editing or casting or scoring or any of that. They're gone before production even starts, and they're probably looking for another job.
Yeah, that seems so strange to me that, they're not involved like a showrunner is involved with every aspect of production. If you're the writer, obviously, I mean, television's for people who are watching on a movie set. The director, the auteur is really in control of everything. Whereas in television, it's the showrunner, it's the producer, the creator, whoever is in charge of the show. The directors are brought in, and there's not a lot of the same directors. You might come in and do 1 or 2 episodes on a long season, but the directors are there. Certainly they get to direct. They get to direct the actors, but the directors don't pick what's in the mise en scène. You've got the standing sets. You've got all those choices are made not by the director. And it's usually the first AD that really is running the set, but the director still makes on TV shows. It's fun. I mean, I've only directed 5 smaller shows, but it was a lot of fun. I could have as much input as I wanted, but it was clearly the producer's show. And I would think that the writers are more invested in their episodes, so you would want them there to make sure that the episodes were completed the way they were written.
Yeah, and so that every episode is tonally, the equivalent to every episode before and after it, because the directors are a lot of freelancers, and so you don't get the same. You might get one director to do 2 episodes in a season, but for the most part, that doesn't even happen. I mean, there are executive producer directors now that get attached to shows, so that's more common than it used to be. But I mean, I got my DGA card about 12 years ago, and I learned to direct by being on set as a writer producer.
And did you end up directing episodes of TV?
Yeah, I did. I show ran the first season of a show called Legit for FX. It was a half-hour comedy starring the Australian comedian Jim Jeffries, and I directed an episode of that.
Wow.
And I had a great...
Yeah, I mean, so like take us through what are some of the larger concerns about the actors? I mean, the actors. What are the larger concerns about the writers being on strike now? What are some of the big points of contention? I went through this with the script doctor a couple days ago, but what are some of the broad strokes so people know what it's not just about necessarily, I mean, money's a lot of it, but it's also about the process as much as it is about the cash and how the process is being sort of eliminated and bastardized, making it harder and harder and harder to deliver the kind of work that writers are used to delivering.
Yeah.
What are some of the? Oh, sorry.
Cash is the big thing, and because streaming residuals are like next to nothing when you work for network and even premium cable. When you get a rerun of your episode, you'd get a check for, $12,000 or $14,000, and now you're lucky to get a check for $40 or $200 for a replay of your episode on Netflix or Amazon. So that's a big part of it. But for younger writers, it's they're not getting the opportunities to be mentored through the production process because they're just in the writer's room, and that's all they experience from show to show, job to job.
Now, why is that so important for them to have those opportunities to be mentored and things like that?
So they can get better at writing, for the medium, and they can someday hopefully create a show themselves, if they're lucky enough and talented enough to get on a great show. Look at like you just said, it's a West Wing vet who is the showrunner for The Diplomat. Is that right?
Yeah.
And you've got Breaking Bad writers who are doing great stuff, and that's just where the next generation of really great stuff is going to come from.
Yeah, and we need that kind of education. I mean, that's the thing that AI is not, all it can do is regurgitate. It can't. I mean, eventually it probably will when the singularity is nigh or whatever. But up until now, and moving forward, it's the human element. It's inspiration. It's the idea of coming up with a great line of dialogue. I don't know if ChatGPT could do that. I haven't seen any indication that it can write great dialogue.
Right.
Not yet. And I think that we need people. I mean, I think we're going to breed common sense and the ability to think clearly and problem solve. Unless we continue to allow human beings to do this, we're going to wind up a dysfunctional civilization. No one's going to be able to change their tire. No one's going to know what to do. And where is that going to leave us? And I don't know what the answer is, but it can't be anywhere good, can it?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I've started to imagine a time when, science fiction, which I love, are themselves written by AI. And, I have a friend whose 20-year-old son said he can't wait to see the first Marvel movie written and directed by AI. And that scared the...
Yeah, I mean, as well as it should. But I think that people don't, I guess maybe obviously we have a whole, there's people that don't believe in free speech anymore because after all,
Right.
Speech is violence, and hate speech hurts my soul, so to speak. Not me. I'm just saying people are saying that. So it's not surprising that people want to embrace, and new technologies are great. But the thing is, these technologies are directly threatening the arts. And the arts is where humanity has traditionally been able to go to define itself, to ruminate on what it means to be human. And if the artists are removed from the equation, as AI is already doing, how's your concept design work going to help you make any money when AI can do it for you? But the real question is, what's going to happen to the human soul? What are we going to have to live for if we don't have artists making art, and if we can't go enjoy art, real, genuine art, where are we going to be? I mean, as a society.
Amen. Yeah, amen. That's a great question.
And I don't mean that. I don't mean that facetiously either. I mean, like you were saying earlier, we watch movies or we watch plays. You could have a real revelation watching human beings on a stage. I mean, I'm sure that's what a lot of people felt watching Shakespeare plays at the Globe Theater, 500 years ago. They had revelatory moments, even when they watched men dressed up as women portray women on stage. They didn't think to themselves, "Oh, that's just a dude." They were able to put themselves in the mindset of watching these incredible plays and getting real insight into the human condition. Even though I might not identify with Hamlet the guy, I still
Right.
understand. I understand his plight, and that's what great writing does. Even though it's about a different time and a different place, great writers make you as an audience member understand what they're trying to convey through the story they're telling. And I don't know if AI will ever be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, look, when you watch a movie, I think, or a television series, you're sort of investing yourself in the story. It's I know people think it's passive, but I don't really believe that it is. Like, I think you see yourself in whatever landscape the story is taking place in, and you see yourself as a part of it, and sort of living vicariously through, whether it's Craig Mazin's like The Last of Us, or Mike White's The White Lotus. Like, you're wondering what it would be like to be in that hotel with all those people, or in a post-apocalyptic zombie landscape. Like, you're experiencing something on a deeper level. It's not, I don't know, we used to call television the boob tube, but it got smarter and more sophisticated than that. And I was lucky enough to experience a lot of it while that was happening, and I just hope that era isn't over.
I hope so too. I mean, and look, the WGA, I think, ultimately is fighting for the rights of people to get paid what they're worth, which I totally understand. But I just hope that the AI question, I mean, look, even I can recognize how great of a tool AI is. I was talking with Dave Parker, my buddy Dave Parker, about there's a new editorial program. And I haven't actually played with it. I just saw a video. Somebody was showing the video off where, like, we do DVD special features and we're cutting interviews with people. And this
Oh, wow.
this AI software could just go down the timeline and cut between the interviewer and the interviewee. And Dave and I were just like talking, like, this took us hours to choose where we're going to cut. And I'm literally just watching this AI thing go down a timeline. And from an editorial standpoint, I'm like, wow, they just did a day's worth of work in 10 seconds.
Right.
Now, I would still have to go in and finesse it, maybe.
Right.
But
Right.
still, the bulk of the majority of the work has been done. And what's really interesting is it probably put it in a situation where I could watch the back and forth between the interviewer and the interviewee immediately and decide what stays, what goes, where do I need to put B-roll. And eventually AI will pick the B-roll out from the thousands of hours of behind-the-scenes footage. It'll already know where to find it and be able to take the footage and put it exactly over whatever somebody's talking about, in the making of a film. So
I don't know if AI will ever be able to remember that weird take, that you almost threw in the trash, but it's going to save a scene in an episode of something, or a scene in a movie, that, you're trying to make something work and it's broken, and there's this one little odd moment that, like, I've seen editors do the most amazing, like, I'm more impressed with editors than I am with almost anybody else in the business, because it's such a nuanced art, I think. So what you're saying is maybe making some editors scared for their jobs, but also maybe it'll make their jobs a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean, I think it's a trade-off. I think that there's definitely, but when it comes to writing and the conception of stories, if you're gonna leave that to AI, all they're doing is regurgitating things other people have already written. And the real question is, maybe is combining these things in these various ways, is that going to lead to greatness? And
Right.
I'm willing to concede the idea that maybe at some point it will. But if it does, then where does that leave the human animal? Where does that leave us as human beings? Do I want to spend the rest of my days watching AI-generated stories populated by AI avatars of people who are in AI-generated sets? And if I know that everything that I'm seeing, even video games, the characters are still motion captured, there's still scripts being written, there's still human beings behind all of it putting it together, even though it's a video game, I still like the idea that there was an actor on set wielding a lightsaber for Jedi Survivor, that they were just motion capturing him or her. I
I don't
guess
know.
I don't know how to feel about it.
We might be sounding like the guys who were, in the middle of the silent movie era
Yeah.
and talkies. We might be those guys right now, but I I still, something in me finds it, like, I connect with the specificity and the idiosyncrasy of a storyteller's gift, and I just can't imagine AI will ever be able to bring that to a script.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to Woody Allen movies I love, obviously Annie Hall or something like Manhattan. Would AI come up? Well, maybe it would, because it would look at Woody Allen's scripts. But when I think it's in Manhattan. Maybe it's in Annie Hall, where he goes and gets Marshall McLuhan. There's the
Right.
pretentious guy in line and talking about Marshall McLuhan, and then it cuts to the actual Marshall McLuhan. You know nothing of my work. Scoot
Right.
walks in. I don't know if an AI would have come up with that gag. I guess if you studied the screenplays of Woody Allen, you probably would end up coming up with that gag and just regurgitating it. But it wouldn't be as funny because we'd already seen it before.
Right. Well, I've seen some AI generated stand up comedy, and it's really surreal and clunky and weird and not funny. But I don't think that it's going to, I don't know if it'll ever get good, but I can imagine, there's an AI generated pizza commercial that almost feels like a real pizza commercial.
Yeah.
So I have no doubt that it's on a steep learning curve, but it's learning very quickly.
I think that's what the thing is. It's happening too quickly in a way. I mean, I find it fascinating that a year ago, nobody was talking about AI at all. But starting in November, it seems like there was a coordinated effort to drop AI art generating programs, writing programs. All these programs were like dumped on us all at once by design. I mean, they figured they had to do it in such a way to slowly we're going to drop all this stuff and we'll let people figure it out. And 6 months later, they're talking about Chat GPT and Midjourney. And it was like it was a coordinated effort. And when you see stuff like that, it was a coordinated effort. And then that's how conspiracy theories are fueled. And in a way, maybe they had to drop all these AI programs to make sure that civilization, the shock to the system that civilization was going to take, it was going to be gradual, as opposed to, they dropped all this stuff. They didn't really say much about it. They let people discover it on their own.
Right.
And they
Well,
did.
I don't know. I'd rather hear Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about, Beetlejuice exploding than AI telling me about it.
That's the thing. But is that going to be true moving forward for everybody?
Right. I don't know. Maybe, I'm sure you're right. I'm sure there's going to be an increasing curiosity, and people are going to be willing to pay money to see stuff that's generated, whether it's art or narrative storytelling or photography, or I don't know. I don't know about music. Somebody told me that the second biggest Drake song online right now is AI generated.
Yeah, and Drake wasn't happy about it. But yeah.
Right.
I mean, and that was also Nick Cave from Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Somebody made a fake Nick Cave song, and of course he came out and excoriated it in the press and talked about how he hated it. But can you imagine if you're a musician and suddenly your fans are like, oh man, give me a Prince song, that he might have written had he lived to collaborate with so-and-so. And they'll give it to you. And the thing that I find really interesting is, and I keep grappling with this question too, is, so if you wanted to see Fritz Lang direct an Alien movie, and you tell AI or Midjourney, show me Fritz Lang's Alien movie, and then you get back all these really cool AI generated images, in 100 years, how are people going to know that wasn't ever a real movie?
Right.
Like at the end of the day, we'll have all these weird mashups and ideas that people have floated, the waking fever dreams or whatever, and we're going to be awash in them, And how are people going to know what was real and what wasn't? And at the end of the day, does it even matter? Does it matter if somebody wants to make a coffee table book of Fritz Lang's Unseen Alien movie with AI and it looks very convincing? Is that bad? Or is that just exercising your creativity?
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I'm thinking about this Star Trek video that I've just seen with Leonard Nimoy in it, and apparently it wasn't AI generated. But
No.
have you seen this thing?
Oh yeah, the Otoy thing. I'm doing my whole show on it tomorrow. It's not.
Yeah.
They use a combination of different things, kind of like what I think that they did with Harrison Ford in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. You know, they're using a combination of real footage and AI and those kinds of things. What's really interesting is that was the third of these videos that Otoy has been making. They're a cloud render company, and they have astonishing software. Like, they're doing things for the Roddenberry Vault, like the Refit Enterprise that's introduced in the motion picture, the one that they had the David Kimball cutaway drawing for. They have digitized that so you can literally take a virtual tour of every portion of that ship. Every portion. Yeah, and they've used it, they've generated it to scale. So if like you're zipping through it, you can go through the entire, and they're doing that with everything. Like if you look at the Roddenberry archive on the bridge of the Enterprise, they show all the different bridges and explain to you the evolution of the idea of the bridge. And it's all 3D, for 4K 3D modeling of these bridges. It looks like they're on actual sets, but that's how good Otoy's renders are. And it's funny because when you look at them, all the Discovery, Strange New Worlds, and Picard season 1 and 2 stuff completely stands out. It doesn't fit with the aesthetic at all.
Right.
And yet they have to try and caress this in now, which is weird, because when you start watching these archival things, it's like, you guys got to come up with another way of you can't say that this is all part of the same universe, because clearly it's not when you look at it.
No.
And So what are some of the points as you understand them, besides pushback on AI? What are some of the specific things that the Writers Guild is asking for? What do they want more of that they're not getting?
They want writers to be hired for longer. They want to get rid of the mini room. They want to hire writers for longer periods than 20 weeks so that they can take part in production. They want to increase residuals because our writers' profits are down 24% in the last 10 years, and that can't continue to happen.
Right.
It's about the dehumanizing of what we've, I've never experienced this level of that dehumanization.
Yeah.
For craft that I've spent over 20 years working in. And now that's the prevalent culture.
It's such a strange thing. On one hand, part of the culture war that's being fought is representation for people who have had no representation in their lives. And on the other hand, you have AI is going to take representation away from everybody. There's going to be no genuine voices left. And everyone's like, well, as a futurist myself, I love technology. I love what it's done for me in my entire life. I think it's been fantastic. But the thing about AI is a lot of the things that I've loved growing up, whether it was Star Trek or Blade Runner or take your pick, they've always been cautionary tales about what too much technology does to the human spirit, and it's not good. And yet everyone is rushing to AI because it's cheaper. It'll but at what cost? You save a few bucks here, you don't employ a human writer, but where are you at the end of the day?
Right. I don't know. I had a friend in grad school in the early 90s. He joined the Flat Earth Society, ironically, and now there are more. I read somewhere that there are more members of the Flat Earth Society than there were before Copernicus, like before we knew better.
Yeah,
And that's there's more knowledge at our fingertips than ever before, and yet people have they think all information is as valid as as anything else. Like it's weird and scary.
no, it is. Now, where do you see? Do you see the WGA making any kind of progress here? Is there gonna be any kind of favorable outcome for the writers?
Yeah, I think so. There has to be. I think that I'm hoping at least that the CEOs of the top 20 companies, at least the streamers, the ones that are newer, that have only been doing this for 10 years, right, or 10 or 12 years, that they're going to be rethinking deeply their model, their business model. At least I hope that's what's going to happen.
I hope so. And you think it's going to go on for a long time?
I'm afraid that it could very well. Yeah, I can't. There's no one at the table. Last week there's no negotiating, and I don't know. I'm sure they'll tell us when negotiation reconvenes, but I don't know how soon that'll happen.
Right. Yeah. Joe Panora asks, Maximum Bob, could the strike be used to shelve Section 31 in Starfleet Academy and be an excuse to go with Star Trek Legacy? Do strikes in general affect green-lit shows? Look, I think that Section 31 and Starfleet Academy are they're shelved until further notice, until the strike is over. They can't move forward because if someone is a signatory to the Writers Guild, and CBS and Paramount are, they can't move forward if something hasn't been written yet. They can't do that. They're violating the rules, and they would be censured, and they would get in lots of trouble with lots of people. So I don't necessarily know if it will cancel these properties, but if it puts them on hold for too long, they might. But the bigger question is, and I don't think Legacy, they're even thinking about that, but what do you think, Rick? Do strikes in general affect greenlit shows? As far as I know, if a show's greenlit and you're moving into production, you can make it. You just can't change the scripts, right?
Right. That's correct. But so greenlit, if it's in production and now they're on hiatus because of the strike, that's one thing. But if it's a project that's just in pre-production, then I'd say all bets are off, because if the studio is in trouble financially, if we're talking about Warner Brothers Discovery or Netflix, they're going to be killing a lot of babies off. I think stuff that you're already enjoying and stuff that you're looking forward to enjoy may disappear.
Yeah, I think so too. It's a little scary. Our friend James Wallace, who works in the industry, says COVID was also used to have writers stay home and work along with the accounting and post. The studios have saved a lot of money by not having offices. Well, that's true.
Yeah, it's true. And I don't think it's helped the writing process, though, to be honest with you. I know it's been easier for some writers who live out of town to work in television, but I got to say, like, being a part of the writer's room culture for so long, so much of the good stuff that you come up with happens in the exchange between real people sharing the same physical space together, even in the break room, getting a cup of coffee, or in the restroom, or at lunch, or just by being stuck in a room together with people. It's so you can work a year with someone in a Zoom room and not know how tall they are.
That it's funny that you say that, because that has been one of the great joys of COVID for me, is when I meet people in person that I've been streaming with for years at a time or something, and they're either taller or shorter than they are in real life, and I found for the most part they're always delightful. It's always delightful to meet people in the real world going, oh my God, because there is something missing. I mean, even though it seems like we're in the room together, it's not the same thing as sitting in the room together.
Yeah. And man, pitching, I can tell you, like, I much prefer pitching to a real person, because you can you can time things differently when you're getting like a real reaction from someone, then this sort of pitching to me feels like I'm on Hollywood Squares, but I'm the only one trying to be funny.
Right. Which is not great. That can't be a great feeling.
No, you get everyone is like, staring at their desk or thinking about other things when they're not in the actual room with you.
Yeah. No. By the way, somebody in the chat asks if James Gunn can write on Superman this week. No, he can't. But he turned his Superman script in, and they could go make that script. They just can't change any of the words. They can't change any of the writing.
Well, he's too, though, right? And I just can't. I don't think he'd do that.
Yeah, I don't. You mean James Gunn? He wouldn't. He wouldn't violate the rules.
No.
But the thing is, we've seen examples. People talk about famously, if you're a James Bond fan, that Quantum of Solace was made during the last writer's strike, and that they couldn't do anything to the script. So some of the problems, I mean, that's what they blame some of the problems. I'm a quantum apologist, but they do say that part of the problem was the fact that it was happening during the writer's strike.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. Well, look, at the last writer's strike also brought us The Apprentice. And if there was no Apprentice, I don't think we would have had Trump for president.
Oh, no, I totally agree with you. I agree. Yeah, there's a lot of things that have changed. So moving forward, where would you like, given a choice, where would you like to see, if you had to have a compromised a deal, what are some of the deal points that you personally would like to see for a new contract, for a new WGA contract? What are some of the things you think are actually attainable that they might be able to achieve through this strike?
Well, the elimination of the mini room would be good. I think the codifying the writer's room as an institution is important because, I just don't know how long, one or two writers can show run an entire production schedule, and continue to, make program worth watching. It's just too back. So I'm hoping that, writers will just get hired through. I'm really hoping that they'll have the experience that I had, 15 years ago.
Yeah, one would hope. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you think it's going to go on a long time?
I hope not. I hope a month from now or less, I'm back at work. I really do. But they don't seem to be, at least, what happened in 2007 was I went to work on Mad Men for season 2, and we were one of the first companies to go back. So because AMC signed the deal, signed the agreement with WGA. So there is a scenario where that can happen, I think, where the AMPTP splinters off and some companies make deals and some companies keep holding out.
Yeah. Yeah. This is interesting. Zachary Zabale says, as an ESL, I think sign language, as an ESL teacher, I had concerns about AI, but not anymore. Human teachers will never be obsolete because AI can only simulate care, but AI can never truly care. That's an interesting point.
Yeah, that's great.
I love that. I think that's great. But I would say yet, AI just isn't, it's going to get exponentially more sophisticated. And I go back to movies that dealt with this, like Her, the movie Her, the Spike Jonze movie where Scarlett Johansson plays the voice of an operating system. And and Joaquin Phoenix falls in love with his operating system because she knows the right things to say. And I can see something like that, something along those lines, occurring. AI will, if there's a singularity and AI becomes self-aware, it will absolutely know how to care. It will absolutely be able to make these decisions, and then it's going to be a really interesting world. Then that AI is going to want to be ambulatory and go places and see things, and then where are we going to be?
Oh my God. I'm going to start building my bunker tomorrow.
I know, right? It's going to be interesting. Tom Jr. Jackson says, our moderator says they are doing AI Beatles songs with real songs.
Wow.
I mean, it's such a weird thing, if the Beatles, at first it's just kind of a novelty, but what happens if people, like I said, in 5 or 10 years forget these things were AI generated? Someone's going to go on the Beatles Wikipedia page and they're going to add on their discography, well, what about this song? What about, or they're already doing that. What about this AI generated thing? These fake Balenciaga ads that somebody was doing that I found, somebody sent me the last couple days. They're hilarious. These AI, they're incredibly well done. And I look at them and I'm like, that's pretty fun. I mean, I'm sure human beings are prompting them, but could AI come up with the idea of making Lord of the Rings or Star Trek Balenciaga ads? I don't know if an AI would ever have come up with that.
I think just watch Peter Jackson's Get Back documentary, and that just, that watch those guys in less than a month come up with some of the best songs in their catalog. I think it takes that. I mean, that movie was a revelation to me, and I'm a huge Beatles fanatic, like my whole life. And I was more inspired by them after seeing that film than I've ever been inspired by them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they were worst, I mean, they were at their worst. John Lennon was hooked on heroin, and George Harrison was miserable, and Paul was desperately trying to keep it together. And they still, I think, all those hangups and pain and stuff contributed to their artistry.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's, art, human pain is where great art begins. I think 100%. Joey Hamilton says, speaking of writing, I watched All About Eve for the first time. I think it's the best script I've ever seen on screen. I believed every word. Joey, you and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. Joseph Makowitz's script for All About Eve is one of my very favorite screenplays ever written, bar none.
Yeah.
You're a fan?
And Preston Sturgis.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, all that stuff. I don't even know if people could write like that today. I don't know. I mean, I guess some people could, but I don't know. I mean, you worked on a show, The West Wing is a show that has writing, which seasons did you work on?
Just season one. Season one. But the episode that I co-wrote with Aaron, In Excelsis Deo, was based on my father was a Korean War vet, and he died homeless. And that episode, that's the only episode of The West Wing to win a writing Emmy. And it was my father's story. And that's, I think, says something about, something that AI will never be able to bring to the table is a personal story.
Yeah. I mean, I think about, I remember getting the box set of the series, and I just was binging the first 4 seasons before Aaron Sorkin was replaced. Was at season 5 is one of the great plummets off a cliff going from the end of season 4 to season 5. The show just, it later picked up. I thought the final season was really clever too. The campaign between Smits and Alan Alda. I loved all that. I thought it was great. And then at the end where Jimmy Smits says, I want you as part of my cabinet. He's like, really? And then reluctantly he agrees. But I remember, I mean, I was shattered like when Mrs. Landingham died, and there's the episode Two Cathedrals where, he ends up having to admit his MS and at the same time dealing with the death of Mrs. Landingham. And he's in Two Cathedrals, he's in the church railing in Latin at God, smokes a cigarette and puts it out on the ground. I'm like, this is one of the greatest episodes of television ever. Yeah. Playing Little Dire Straits, the Brothers in Arms moment where he walks out in the rain.
Sorkin's got the old school chops for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even his stuff, his playwright stuff. I mean, uh, uh, you know, you can't handle the truth. I want.
Yeah.
Why am I not?
Yeah, me too. Now,
A Few Good Men. A Few
Good
Good
Men.
Men.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was even watching what he's been directing. Like I loved Molly's Game, his directorial future. I thought that was great. It was great.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if AI's ever come up with dialogue like Sorkin.
No. I don't know. So Joey, we're in agreement about All About Eve. It's such a great script. Nick Parrish writes in and says, "What's up, Rob? So Box Office Pro just recently posted a Q&A that they did with Adam Aaron. And in the Q&A, Adam Aaron is the head of AMC. In the Q&A, he was asked if he's renegotiating the PVOD window deal he made with Universal now that the box office is doing much better. And part of his response was, honestly, the PVOD experiment of 2020 is simply not really on my radar right now. And he concluded that there are other issues that are of far greater importance to my time and attention. Is he a Galactus threat to movies?" Adam Aaron, we always made fun of him. I mean, I don't necessarily think that Adam Aaron was just trying to make it work and trying to make deals. I mean, the thing about movies is if movies are playing in theaters that people want to see and keep going back, having a window is silly. They left Top Gun in the theater, Maverick, as long as it would play. And that's true of any movie. If it keeps playing, they're going to leave it in the theaters. And if a movie makes money in the theaters, it makes money. I mean, I love that Evil Dead Rise was a movie that was supposed to go direct to streaming. After successful test screenings, they said, no, we're going to put this in theaters. I mean, they made $100 million they didn't think they were going to make on that movie simply because they made the choice to put it out. Smile from late last year, the horror film Smile. I mean, that movie on a $17 million spend ended up making $200 million worldwide, and that was going to go to streaming directly. And because it didn't, they had $200 million in their pockets. That makes Smile a rousing success, and everyone's happy. And that's, I think, the way the business should work.
So much more fun to see in a theater, too.
So much more fun to see in a theater. I mean, when you have a horror film that delivers and you see it, I got to tell you, at CinemaCon, they showed us a movie called Joyride, and it's about
I heard about it.
It was, I haven't laughed as much. I mean, first of all, it's absolutely filthy. These four girls, in the best way possible, they really push the envelope, and because it's coming from these girls, it's even funnier. And
wow.
It blew the roof off the place. You know, you have all these jaded theater owners at CinemaCon in Vegas to find out what are the studios going to be serving up for us in the next year. That's what CinemaCon is. And then sometimes Lionsgate or somebody will come out. They showed us all of Top Gun Maverick last year. They showed us The Flash this year. But watching Joyride, they showed us the whole movie. And I mean, I'd read buzz about it. You can see the trailer online. The trailer does not do the movie justice. It's so hilarious. And I would implore anyone, I think it opens in July, do yourself a favor and go see Joyride with an opening night crowd, because people are either going to embrace it or they're not going to know what it is. But I promise you, it's a great experience at the movies to see that in a room full of people that are going to laugh, because it's beyond, it's so funny.
Oh, I can't wait.
It's really good.
Can't wait.
Well, listen, what important lessons do you think the audience may be watching tonight? What are some of the things that they can take away? I thought your article for the LA Times was really great. It was very succinct. It really addressed all the issues. What are some of the things that you think that the audience should take to heart about this writer's strike?
That writers, especially in Los Angeles and New York, are struggling to make ends meet. Like writers on some of the best shows that you're watching are having trouble paying the rent and going from job to job. And that just wasn't the case, you know, eight or so years ago. I mean, it's sort of, you know, House of Cards was the sort of first, I don't know, I want to say nail in the coffin, but at the time, you know, I was the second in command on that show for season one, at least until production started. And their first offer was, you know, you're working on a web series, and
That's such a weird $100 million web series starring a 2-time
right,
Academy Award winner and a director who's made some of the great movies of the last 25 years.
yeah. Well, they thought they could get away with it, and then they couldn't. But again, that different culture, that different corporate business culture. I don't know if it's the Silicon Valley model, but they started just chipping away at things. You know, even then, I mean, I knew writers that were on Jessica Jones. They when they were first writing the show, they found out a month into writing that they weren't getting health and pension contributions for their work, and so the showrunner walk. The showrunner closed the office, and I don't know if they could have fired her for that or not, but they, you know, they rectified that. But they'll get away with whatever they can for as long. Hopefully, we're going to put an end to that.
Wow, that's just so. Are you so you're optimistic about the people on the guild side, the negotiators? You think they're gonna get some concessions?
Yeah, yeah.
But you think it's gonna last a long time?
I hope not. I was going to say I hope not. I hope it doesn't last, you know, the month. But there was a strike captains meeting Saturday. I wasn't there, but I had a lot of friends there, and they said, "Gird your loins. We're in for a long one."
Oh no! How does your wife feel about that?
She's scared, you know. She likes me better when I'm working. I'm happier.
Yeah,
I'm not around all the time.
yeah. You should start a YouTube channel. She'll really love you then.
Yeah.
No, so that's, I mean, that's interesting. I'm definitely team WGA all the way. And, I want to see, I want to see the business as a healthy business. Of course, Hollywood,
Right.
I've worked in Hollywood now for 34 years, and I don't know if it's ever been healthy since I've been here. I don't. Yeah, I mean, actually, that's not true because I saw a healthy business, at least from my perspective, in the 90s. There was a lot of you could make a lot of making independent movies. There's still ways to get your movies seen theatrically and get picked up for theatrical distribution and really make some money. And it was a good time. It was a good time, but now it's harder than ever to make a living making movies. You think, oh, great, I have $4 million to make my movie.
Right.
Well, good luck, Grasshopper. More power to you. But you can do it. Well, Rick, what do you have coming up? Can you talk about anything I guess you're currently not working on anything, but what you have been working on?
Yeah. I'm part of a show that is a spin-off of a show called Bosch.
So
and
good.
It's the Untitled J. Edgar project, and J. Edgar is Harry Bosch's partner in the first series.
Yeah,
and I think he times in Legacy as well. They're doing a Renee Ballard series as well. She's the new character that Michael Connelly is writing novels about in the same world as Bosch.
Oh, okay.
I'm hoping that we'll have 10 episodes of that. It'll be on Amazon Freevee.
Yep.
And so that's mostly what I've been doing.
Well, I mean, that's I love Bosch. I love Titus Welliver. I loved him as that character. He was great, and for the most part, I really enjoyed. I like the Michael Connelly books. I was a big fan of. I mean, I love the long series of detective fiction, whether it's like James Lee Burke or Michael Connelly or any of those things. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah. Elmore Leonard, Don Willow.
Oh yeah, amazing. All that stuff is so great. It's nice to see that it's being adapted. Well,
Yeah.
listen, Rick, we've been going for almost 90 minutes, and it seemed like this went for 2 seconds. I was going to talk about a bunch of other stuff, but 90 minutes, that's a good length. I don't want to keep you. By the way, have you watched tonight's episode of Succession yet?
I haven't.
I was going to say before the show, it only went live at 6. I haven't either. But again, a show that lives in it's people in rooms talking. I don't think AI could give us a script of Succession. I don't think that would work out very well.
No. Somebody printed a script, a page of a script from an actual scene, I think, and asked AI to write a different version and compared the two, and it was pretty obvious which was which.
Right? Yeah, that's a good take the script for All About Eve, or Patty Chayefsky's script for Network or something, and ask a Chat GPT or something to rewrite that and see what you get.
Yeah, good luck.
Well, listen, Rick, it's been great to have you on the show. I very much appreciate your time. I really liked your article in the LA Times, and I hope that you come back again and we can continue dialoguing, and then also maybe take us through if it makes it to Freevee, if the strike ever ends. It would be nice to come back and take us through the creation of one episode of episodic television that you've worked on from beginning to end.
Oh,
something like that.
I would love that.
Would that be fun?
I would love that. I'm a huge fan.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, Rick, so thanks for being here. I want to thank everybody watching. I want to thank my moderators, Tom Jr. Jackson, and everybody for moderating the show. I want to thank everybody who supports the show via Super Chats and tips and all of that. And we'll have a member call this coming weekend, my birthday weekend. So thank you there. And that's one of the great things I like about this channel is being able to bring people like Rick. And I want to do a lot more of these industry discussions. So I want to thank you very much for being here, sir. And I hope you come back again.
I will. Thank you. Thank you, Rob.
And remember, as I always say, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, not ChatGPT, but every person that you meet. And all you have to do is listen. All right, everybody. And on that note, I would say to everybody, thank you to Rick Cleveland and have a better night.
Good night.
And we're out. That was great.